Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst, who's live in Tel Aviv with the latest on Iran. Trey, good morning.
Yeah. Hey guys, good morning. We do start with some breaking news. The Israelis launched strikes against Hezbollah in the Lebanese capital of Beirut this morning. A number of strikes against the Hezbollah commander there in response to drone attacks that were launched over the border this weekend. Iran now says this will not go unanswered. And remember, just last weekend, they fired 30 ballistic missiles into Israel after the IDF launched similar strikes. Now, a diplomat involved in the talks told Fox News the strikes today in Beirut are creating issues with finalizing the deal. They went on to accuse Israel of sabotaging this agreement. The Israelis are pushing back, saying that their civilians are under threat in the northern part of their country, and these will not go unanswered, these attacks over the border. This does come amid an optimistic statement by the Prime Minister of Pakistan, who on Saturday posted to X saying, quote, "We are closer to a peace deal than ever before." With finalization likely expected in the next 24 hours, Pakistan is preparing for the electronic signing of the peace deal immediately after, followed by technical level talks next week. Now, Iran's foreign minister weighed in Saturday on the most sensitive issue within the agreement amid reports that a Qatari negotiating team arrived in Tehran today to push the understanding across the finish line.
We postponed the nuclear issue to the final agreement for various reasons, as it was truly impossible to discuss it under current circumstances. The demands they had were in no way acceptable. Therefore, we brought up other issues that could be agreed upon in the first stage and postponed the nuclear issue to the second stage, which is, of course, a more difficult phase in which 60 days of negotiation have been envisioned.
This after President Trump posted to Truth Social overnight saying, in part, quote, "My agreement with Iran is the exact opposite, a wall to no nuclear weapon. In fact, they no longer want a nuclear weapon, nor will they have one, either through purchase, development, or any other form of procurement." The Iranians are continuing provocative action in the Strait of Hormuz as diplomatic efforts progress. CENTCOM said Saturday on X that Iran launched multiple one-way attack drones in an attempt to strike commercial ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. forces have downed all of them in recent hours as traffic flow through the strait continues unimpeded. The international trade corridor remains open for transit. Now, if a deal is ultimately signed, we understand, according to a senior U.S. official, that the Strait of Hormuz will be immediately open to that traffic for international shipping to take place. Guys?
So, Trey, you've been here from the very beginning of all of this. What is your sense in terms of how different these negotiations are from previous negotiations that we've expected that didn't pan out?
They're similar in some ways and different in others. The one similarity has to do with what they are discussing as it relates to Iran's nuclear program and ensuring that the regime never has a path to a nuclear weapon. That, coupled with opening the Strait of Hormuz, remains the primary goal for the Trump administration. What's different is how the president got here. Remember, when the Iranians were stepping back from the negotiating table, they were dragging their feet and tapping the U.S. along, according to President Trump. That's when the president, also in response to the shoot-down of a Apache helicopter, responded with airstrikes for 2 days against the Iranian regime. And the president told me from the Situation Room that night that the Iranians called him and they asked him to stop the bombing, and he said he'd stop the bombing if they signed the agreement. And ultimately, that moved things forward to a place where the region does believe a deal is possible in a matter of hours or maybe even days. The X factor here has to do with Israel striking Lebanon today. Now, the Israelis say they are going to respond when their civilians are attacked with drones or rockets in the northern part of this country. But the Iranians just last week fired 30 ballistic missiles at this country in response to a similar strike. And so the question now is, are the Iranians going to respond to this IDF strike in the Lebanese capital of Beirut against Hezbollah? Or can this deal be signed before there's any sort of back and forth exchanged in the region?
So what happens, Trey, if Iran does fire?
If Iran fires, the Israelis say they will strike back. And it may be a similar situation that we saw last week. Remember, President Trump got directly involved and told both sides to stop shooting. And they did. And things went back to the pace at which they were moving before toward an agreement. Again, there is sort of this exchange of fire taking place, but it's a broader equation that the Israelis want to avoid. They don't want Hezbollah, Iran's largest proxy, to feel like they have free ability to launch rockets and drones over the border, but the Iranians are trying to tie the situation in Lebanon to the broader agreement with the United States. And we heard even today from Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammad Ghalibaf, who spoke about the possibility of an agreement, and he was directly tying Israel's actions to that possibility. And so today will likely be quite tense as the region waits to see if the Iranians are going to respond. And we do know the Israelis are set to hold a Security Cabinet meeting tonight in anticipation for that possible attack.
So we know that, Trey, that Israel has been blocked from these negotiations, President Trump keeping them out of it because, as Shannon Bream said earlier in the show, there is some daylight between the goals in this war for the United States versus the goals for Israel. Now, that we know that Israel for, the past 15 or more years have been lobbying to have us go to war with Iran and deal with the nuclear weapons, which President Trump has done on their behalf. And then in the middle of that, this front in Lebanon has opened up, Israel attacking Lebanon over Hezbollah. So do you think, two questions, do you think that these attacks in Lebanon will blow up this deal that President Trump clearly wants very badly on this peace negotiation and ceasefire with Iran? And two, can you tell us a little bit more about what's happening to the civilians, the innocent civilians, not Hezbollah, but the innocent civilians who have been displaced, bombed, their fields have been, agricultural fields have been decimated, historical sites bombed as well, and in the case of Beirut, suburbs being attacked?
Yeah, when I spoke with President Trump about a week ago, after the Israelis struck the Dakhia neighborhood of southern Beirut, he told me he wasn't happy with the Israeli strikes against Hezbollah. He understood them, but ultimately he's trying to get a peace deal across the finish line here. And there is concern in the region that this could at least temporarily derail these talks toward an agreement that is expected to be signed in a matter of hours. And so we've not yet gotten any response from President Trump or the administration as it relates to the strikes this morning. But remember, the Iranians are threatening to launch new attacks against Israel as a result of those strikes. More broadly, when we talk about the civilian population of Lebanon, there's a mixture of people in Lebanon, even in the Lebanese capital of Beirut. You have both Sunni and Shia Muslims, and you have a very large Christian population. And a lot of them are mixed among each other, not in the southern Dakhia neighborhood, but throughout the country of Lebanon. And we've reported there on the ground in Beirut before. There have been thousands of people displaced from the south of Lebanon as the Israeli ground campaign against Hezbollah continues. Many of them are Shia, some of them are Christian, and around 3,000 people have been killed, many of them Hezbollah combatants, many of them civilians. And so this really paints a picture of the situation on the ground in Lebanon. But when you're reporting in Beirut, as we have done in the past, you get a real sense of what the city is like. You don't often travel to that southern Dakhia neighborhood because it is controlled by Hezbollah. But along the coast and in many of these hotels where Westerners travel and will go on vacation, you see people much like you see in Israel who want to go to the beach. They want to go to coffee shops and restaurants. And they're hopeful that this ultimately will lead to a broader agreement that the State Department is working on with the leadership of Secretary Rubio to create a normalization agreement between Israel and Lebanon with one goal: to disarm Hezbollah and ensure that the Iranians don't have leverage over the country of Lebanon and the innocent people that live there.
All right. Trey Yingst, live for us in Tel Aviv. Trey, thank you very much.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.